Hare Krishna. Can you please make Kishori Radha co-host or host or however it has to be so she can share screen?
Absolutely, Maharaj.
Nitai Gaurasundra Prabhu, you're muted. You are muted.
Yes, Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisances, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Are we to start on time?
Yes, Maharaj. We'll start on time, Maharaj.
Okay, 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Yes, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Shake it 8 o'clock.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees, and please accept my humble obeisances, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. So it's our great honor, good fortune, and privilege to again be speaking to Nitai Gaurasundra Prabhu and his group there in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. We're going to begin, as we always do, by the chanting of Jaya Radha Madhav. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivadidhari Gopi Janavallabha Girivadidhari Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Gauranitai, 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 Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, 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 Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Radhe Shyam, Radhe Shyam, Radhe Shyam, Jaya Radhe Shyam, Jaya Radhe Shyam, Radhe Shyam, Radhe Shyam, Jaya Radhe Shyam, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe. Haribol, 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 Nitai Gaur, Haribol, Nitai Gaur, Haribol, 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 Nitai Gaur, Haribol. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki jai, Shri Shri Patita Pavana Jagannatha Swami ki jai, Shri Shri Giriraj Govardhana ki jai, Shri Shri Nrsingadev Bhakta Prahlad Maharaj ki jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayat Nasta Prayashu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarane Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Karipa Sindhubi Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I always ask Nitai Gaurasundara Prabhu to choose a verse, and he has chosen 5:18:11, the fifth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So we'll go ahead and chant that verse and then go through the word for word, translation, and purport. Yat sangalabdam nijavirya vaibhavam tirtam mohusam sprishatam himanasam Aratya Jota Shutibir Gato Gacham Kobai Nasevita Mukunda Vikramam. Yat, of whom, the devotees. Sangalabdam, achieved by the association. Nijavirya Vaibhavam, whose influence is uncommon. Tiratam, holy places like the Ganges. Muhu, repeatedly. Samsprishatam, of those touching. He, certainly. Manasam, the dirty things in the mind. Harati, vanquishes. Ajaha, the supreme unborn one. Antaha, in the core of the heart. Shutibihi, by the ears. Gataha, entered. Angajam, dirty things or infections of the body. Kaha, who. By, indeed. Na, not. Sevita, would serve. Mukunda Vikramam, the glorious activities of Mukunda, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. By associating with persons for whom the Supreme Personality of Godhead Mukunda is the all in all, one can hear of his powerful activities and soon come to understand them. The activities of Mukunda are so potent that simply by hearing of them, one immediately associates with the Lord. For a person who constantly and very eagerly hears narrations of the Lord's powerful activities, the absolute truth, the personality of Godhead in the form of sound vibrations, enters within his heart and cleanses it of all contamination. On the other hand, although bathing in the Ganges diminishes bodily contaminations and infections, this process and the process of visiting holy places can cleanse the heart only after a long time. Therefore, who is the sane man who will not associate with devotees to quickly perfect his life? Purport. Bathing in the Ganges can certainly cure one of many infectious diseases, but it cannot cleanse one's materially attached mind, which creates all kinds of contaminations in material existence. However, one who directly associates with the Supreme Lord by hearing of his activities cleanses the dirt from his mind and very soon comes to Krishna consciousness. Sutta Goswami confirms this in Srimad Bhagavatam 1:2:17. Shunvatam svakata Krishna punya shavana kirtana vidyantas dohi abhadrani vidunoti sarit satam. The Supreme Lord within everyone's heart becomes very pleased when a person hears narrations of his activities, and he personally cleanses the dirt from the mind of the listener. Ridi antosto hi abhadrani vidunoti. He washes off dirt from the mind. Material existence is caused by dirty things within the mind. If one can cleanse his mind, he immediately comes to his original position of Krishna consciousness, and thus his life becomes successful. Therefore, all the great saints in the devotional line very strongly recommend the process of hearing. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu introduced the congregational chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra to give everyone a chance to hear Krishna's holy name. For simply by hearing Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, one becomes purified, Cheto Darpana Marjanam. Therefore, our Krishna consciousness movement is chiefly engaged in chanting the Hare Krishna mantra all over the world. After one's mind becomes cleansed by chanting Hare Krishna, one gradually comes to the platform of Krishna consciousness and then reads books like Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and the Nectar of Devotion. In this way, one becomes more and more purified of material contamination. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 1:18, Nasta prayashu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtaki. By regularly hearing the Bhagavatam and rendering service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is practically destroyed, and loving service unto the glorious Lord, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. In this way, simply by hearing of the powerful activities of the Lord, the devotee's heart becomes almost completely cleansed of material contamination, and thus his original position as an eternal servant who is part and parcel of the Lord becomes manifest. While the devotee engages in devotional service, the passionate and ignorant modes of material nature are gradually vanquished, and then he acts only in the mode of goodness. At that time, he becomes happy and gradually advances in Krishna consciousness. All the great acharyas strongly recommend that people be given a chance to hear about the Supreme Lord. Then success is assured. The more we cleanse the dirt of material attachment from our hearts, the more we will be attracted by Krishna's name, form, qualities, paraphernalia, and activities. This is the sub and substance of the Krishna consciousness movement. So, some very important points are brought out in this verse. There's a lot of importance kind of revolving around sadhu sangha. And we know in Srila Rupa Goswami's 9-step process from Shraddha to Prema that the whole thing begins with a little bit of faith, Shraddha. And then from that faith, one may want to know more. This brings one into the association of devotees, sadhu sangha. So practically from the beginning to the end of our practice of Krishna consciousness, the association of devotees is absolutely essential. When we associate with devotees, providing that we associate with them in the right way, then this will bring us to the next stage of bhajana kriya, in which we start to practice regulated devotional service. And of course, in this stage, generally, one will take Diksha as part of this, because that is required to be connected through disciplic succession with Krishna. And one makes a more serious commitment to the practice of Krishna consciousness. When one does that, then one makes a huge effort, and it takes a huge effort, to remove the unwanted attachments, the anartha vritti. So this is a really crucial stage. If one is very serious in one's practice of Krishna consciousness, then the unwanted attachment, the anarthas, will gradually diminish over time. And it's only after we remove a sufficient amount of those anarthas that we actually become steady, nishta. And from steadiness comes taste, and then a shakti, attachment, and then we can actually experience bhava, actual love for the Supreme Lord, which will mature in prema, or pure love for Krishna. So sadhu sangha is absolutely essential. Krishna speaks of this in Bhagavad Gita, which Prabhupada quotes this particular verse many, many times throughout his lectures and his writings. Mahatmanas tumam partha daivim prakritam ashrita bhajanti ananya manaso gatva bhutadim avyayam. So he explains to Arjuna that those who are not deluded, he says, they're not deluded, the great souls, they are under protection of the divine nature, he says. What do? They're fully engaged in devotional service because they know Krishna as the Supreme Lord. Now, what's interesting is in the purport to that particular verse, Prabhupada mentions that I'm going to read this. The Mahatma does not divert his attention to anything outside Krishna because he knows perfectly well that Krishna is the original Supreme Person, the cause of all causes. There is no doubt about it. Such a Mahatma, or great soul, develops through the association of other Mahatmas, pure devotees. Pure devotees are not even attracted by Krishna's other features, such as the four-armed Mahavishnu. They are simply attracted by the two-armed form of Krishna. So, again, mention here that one can only become a Mahatma by associating with other Mahatmas, which means that we have to associate with devotees. And as we will mention a little bit later, in a certain way, there are certain guidelines and there are certain parameters that we set in our association with the devotees. So these great souls, what makes them great? How are they serving the Lord that attracts the Lord's attention? He says in the next verse, Satatam kirtayanto mam yatantas cha drita vritaha namasyantas chamam bhaktya nitya yukta upashate. What do? They're always chanting my glories, Krishna says. They're endeavoring with great determination. So they're very determined in serving Krishna. They bow down before the Lord, not just physically, but mentally. Their whole being is offered in service to the Supreme Lord. So they're worshiping the Lord in great devotion. Now, interestingly enough, to this verse 9:14, our Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he gives an interesting comment, which is relevant to what we're speaking about today. He says that a Mahatma always serves and glorifies Krishna regardless of time and place. He offers his obeisances and chants a fixed number of rounds with great determination. The word mam is used twice in this verse. The repetition emphasizes that these activities are offered to Krishna and to no one else. So it's not that we can associate with or only associate with the very advanced devotees, because there's sometimes that notion. This is the mentality of the Kanishta Adhikari, who may have a syndrome. You may have heard of this syndrome. The syndrome is called My Diksha Guru Only Syndrome, where one says that I only listen to what my Diksha Guru says and to nobody else. Of course, it's commonly seen that when the Diksha Guru gives some instruction, it's not that the disciple will follow it either. If the Diksha Guru tells the disciple, please associate with, please serve the other Vaishnavas, and if that so-called disciple decides not to follow that instruction, then he or she is not following the Diksha Guru either. And in fact, only following one Guru, and that's the Guru of the mind. As my mind dictates, I will carry out my mind's instructions. We hear in another place in the 5th canto that this is where Jud Bharat is giving instruction to King Rahugana. And he's very clear, very strong. He says that unless one has the opportunity to smear his entire body with the dust of the lotus feet of great devotees, one cannot realize the absolute truth. So, we can't get away from this. There's no way we can get around this. We have to associate with the devotees in the proper way. In the Madhya Lila of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, we hear that the mula, or the root of devotional service, is to associate with advanced devotees. And it goes further to say that even when one's dormant love for Krishna is awakened, association with devotees is still most essential. So, really, as I mentioned earlier, from the beginning to the end, devotee sangha is absolutely required. It's an absolute necessity. In another place, Lord Kapila is speaking to his mother Devahuti. Famous verse 325:25. Satat prasangam mama virya sambido. He says that the message of Godhead can be properly discussed. How? Only, he says, only in the society of devotees. And he says, if you do that, it's very pleasing to hear in that type of association. And if you're hearing in the Sangha of devotees, then he says the transcendental experience, the door to the transcendental experience quickly opens, and then one gains very firm faith like this. In a 4th canto, and this is in the section discussing Dhruva Maharaj, Prabhupada says something very strong. In the purport, you would have heard this before, but very much to the point. He says that transcendental devotional service cannot be complete and cannot be relishable without the association of devotees. We have therefore established the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Anyone who is trying to be aloof from this Krishna Consciousness society and yet engage in Krishna consciousness is living in a great hallucination, he says, for this is not possible. So again and again and again, and this is just a small sampling, to say it is essential to keep good devotee association. Now, there's a saying that familiarity breeds contempt. As we associate with devotees very intimately over a long period of time, we can take them for granted. We can consider them to be just like ordinary persons and become a little over-familiar in the way that we think of them, the way we speak of them, the way we act with them. And of course, we're warned against this. We're warned against this again and again and again. The hati mata, the mad elephant offense, Vaishnava aparad. Now, we hear that Vaishnava aparad can be committed in the mind, through words, and through action. Now, of course, in this age, we don't get the result of the things we think. We can thank Krishna for that, because we'd be in bad shape of all those thoughts that run through our minds. Many of them are probably negative. If we were held accountable for all those thoughts, we'd be in bad shape. So we're not held accountable just by thinking something. However, the way that the thought process works, it moves from thinking to feeling and then to willing. So if we're not careful, if we let the thought just linger for a long period of time, we can gradually develop the desire to engage the senses, to fulfill it or act on it. So we're advised to control the mind under all circumstances. More often than not, we'll engage the sense of speech. We'll say something, like the knee-jerk reaction. Someone says something to us, we'll immediately, retaliate by saying something back to them, much like children do. For some of us, we never grow up, and we continue to act just like children, no matter how old we get. So we respond, negatively through words. And of course, worst is through action. In dealing with devotees, it's been analyzed that someone who goes down the path of Vaishnava aparad becomes critical of devotees, and may criticize a devotee for his social background. That's one category. Such and such is of a certain social status. We start to categorize like that. Or we might criticize a devotee for past sins or faults, which he may have committed previously in this lifetime. You criticize someone for unintentional sin. Someone has some difficulty. Who doesn't? Some difficulty along the way, and they have some accidental fall down of whatever degree. We could criticize for that. Or criticize for traces of previous sinful habits. Now, you can imagine if in the beginning Prabhupada was so critical that it's very likely we would not be here today, because many of those early devotees, they had, how do we say, a lot of problems. They were very weak. In the early days at 26 Second Avenue, Prabhupada would lecture, and some of them, because they were still addicted to smoking cigarettes, would go out and take a break and smoke a cigarette and come back. So things like that were going on. What to speak of intoxication in those early days, some of those persons that were coming. But Prabhupada tolerated, he had faith that if people would continue to come and they would associate with devotees, hear the holy name, chant the holy name, hear the Gita, hear the Bhagavatam, take prasad, that they be purified. He had that faith. Of course, we know from one of Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers, Akinchana Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj, who after Prabhupada had gotten a fair amount of success, a lot of success actually, he challenged a couple of Prabhupada's godbrothers who had been sent by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to Europe to preach. And they returned with very little to show for themselves. And so he asked them, why was our Swami Maharaj, referring to Prabhupada, successful and you were not? So either they didn't want to answer, or they didn't know, probably didn't want to answer. And he said it's very clear that Prabhupada had two assets. The first, he had absolute faith in the chanting of Krishna's name, that it would purify persons' hearts. And secondly, he had absolute faith in the instruction given to him by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So Prabhupada came armed with that, and he was very liberal, certainly very liberal in the beginning. Just somehow or another, get these people together, let them associate. He was, at the beginning, the only one probably worth associating with. But he liberally gave his association, and as he gave his association and purified the hearts of those who first came to him, then they were able to give association to others. Now, of course, it goes without saying, if one goes down the path of Vaishnava aparad, there are devastating consequences. I have some favorite quotes on this. It at least makes me aware and very careful in my association with devotees. So there's a quotation from the Chaitanya Bhagavat that says, one who commits offenses against Vaishnavas attains only misery life after life. His learning and austerity bears no fruit. Blasphemy of Vaishnavas is the worst kind of sinful behavior. One who engages in blasphemy of Vaishnavas will find that Krishna does not accept his worship. A person who blasphemes Vaishnavas is therefore the worst kind of sinner. So quite strong. But there's more. Another place in the Chaitanya Bhagavat. It is the conclusion of all the revealed scriptures that one who blasphemes a devotee is doomed. For such a person, everything is torn to pieces by the powerful trident of his sinful reactions. A sinful person who disregards this principle and insults great souls will suffer birth after birth for his offense. And my favorite, from the Skanda Purana, if those two aren't wake-up calls, this one really is. A fool who blasphemes Vaishnavas goes to the worst kind of hell along with generations of his ancestors. So, you can go with those who are very near and dear to you. You can take everybody with you. One who kills a devotee, as well as one who blasphemes devotees, or one who is envious of devotees, or one who fails to offer obeisances to Vaishnavas upon seeing them, or one who becomes angered at a Vaishnava, or who does not become joyful upon seeing a Vaishnava, these 6 classes of men are all considered to be candidates for falling down into hell. Let's look at that. It's unlikely that we will kill a devotee, although if looks could kill, we might. More often than not, we may speak behind someone's back, to criticize them. Envy, there's so much envy in our hearts still, and we Our original envy is the envy of Krishna, so if we're envious of Krishna, we're envious of everybody else, including his devotees. How about this one? Who fails to offer obeisances to Vaishnavas upon seeing them. In the early days, this was so common. I remember we would regularly do this, when we would see someone, particularly for the first time, but even during the morning program, we would just walk up to a devotee and, say, please accept my humble obeisances, and we would exchange, obeisances like that. It was very common. It's become less common nowadays. And again, familiarity, I believe. Hardly many devotees even address others by Prabhu. They usually just use the first name. Like someone is, Krishna Das or something, Krishna Prabhu, Krishna Das Prabhu, that just the first name or whatever. They don't even say Prabhu. They can somehow omit that. That's a problem because by uttering Prabhu, we're offering respect to that person. We're seeing them as our master. And naturally, if they're in the position of a master, then we're in the position of a servant. It just really creates the proper consciousness to, serve the devotees in this way. Become angered at a Vaishnava. I think we've all done that in the past. How about this? One does not become joyful upon seeing a Vaishnava. So, in today's gathering, we should actually be joyful to see one another. What to speak of, we go to a center or go to a temple, we should be joyful to see other devotees. I have seen in some places that, when sometimes people come, they avoid the association of devotees. Just go into the temple and offer obeisance to the deities, and that's it. And they kind of avoid the sangha of devotees. But here it's considered an offense if you're not joyful, actually joyful upon seeing a devotee. So of course, what to do. There are some remedial measures. The main one is that if you've offended someone, then you have to go and ask for forgiveness from the person you've offended. Otherwise, there's no way that you will be excused for that offense. It's also said you can appeal to the mercy of Nityananda Prabhu, and this will help. Another is when Mother Sachi was delivered from her offense of offending Advaita Acharya, hearing that is said to help. But these are remedial measures, and it's better not to get into the position to begin with. So there's this great importance of hearing and chanting in the association of devotees. There is another quote in the 4th canto of the Bhagavatam, again referring to the Sangha of devotees. It is said, "My dear highly glorified Lord, if one, in the association of pure devotees, hears even once the glories of your activities, he does not, unless he is nothing but an animal, give up the association of devotees, for no intelligent person would be so careless as to leave their association. The perfection of chanting and hearing about your glories was accepted even by the goddess of fortune, who desired to hear of your unlimited activities and transcendental glories." That's quite strong. Give up the association of devotees. We're nothing but an animal, it is said here. Now, Prabhupada often referred to the Sangha of Vaishnavas, particularly in the context of Sri Narada Muni. Although he was just a young boy at the time, he took advantage of serving the Bhakti Vedantas. What did he do? What could he do? He was just 5 years old. What did he know? He just did some menial service. Clean their cloth, clean the room, serve their meals, like that. Offered some water. But just by doing those little services, and there are no little services when we serve the devotees, but the Bhaktivedantas were very much pleased, and they bestowed their mercy upon him. What happened? He was then able to understand the message of the Bhaktivedantas. So to actually understand the message of Krishna, we have to serve his devotees. That's the access. Without serving them, we will not understand the message. It has to be done through the Vaishnavas. There was a beautiful lecture that Prabhupada gave. This was early on in 1967 in San Francisco. And he said that, again referring to ISKCON, he said, therefore we have established this International Society for Krishna Consciousness. He said, a society is required, sadhu sangha, just to give opportunity to persons who have got little faith to develop that faith into Krishna consciousness. So in other places, Prabhupada makes it clear, this was his purpose. He says in the Nectar of Instruction, that just as there are various associations, the Law Association, the Medical Association, the Businessmen's Association, and so on, and each of those are formed to further the aims and objects of a particular field. He said, we need a society in which the spiritual values are discussed, they're practiced, and through that sangha, they're reinforced. Now, I spoke earlier about the need to regulate the sangha amongst devotees in a certain way. And, of course, Rupa Goswami has explained this. He says that there are 6 symptoms of love that are shared by one devotee and another. And they're seemingly very simple. Offering gifts in charity, accepting charitable gifts, these 2 things. And the gifts do not have to be, of great monetary value. We sometimes think it has to be something that's worth a lot of money, but not so. It can have great spiritual value and very little monetary value. For example, just giving another Vaishnava a beautiful photograph of the deities, for example, that is there. Or giving them just something very simple as a bead bag or counter beads or these kind of things. Devotional paraphernalia. What to speak of prasad, that's coming up. So we can offer, we can accept. We accept prasad and offering prasad. We should feel great pleasure if we can cook something nice, offer it to the deities, and distribute that prasad to the devotees. It should be so pleasing to the heart. It creates such a wonderful atmosphere to do this. What to speak of revealing one's mind in confidence and inquiring confidentially. So our Sangha is meant for that. It's meant for hearing and chanting and creating this wonderful atmosphere guided by the 6 principles of Sangha as enunciated by Srila Rupa Goswami. So in one place, Prabhupada says that in such Sangha, he says, Gramya Kata Vigata. He said, there's no chance of talking of worldly matters. And this is again in another place in the 5th canto, where Prabhupada says that in an assembly of pure devotees, there is no question of discussing material subjects like politics and sociology. In an assembly of pure devotees, there is discussion only of the qualities, forms, and pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is praised and worshipped with full attention. In the association of pure devotees, by constantly hearing such topics respectfully, even a person who wants to merge into the existence of the absolute truth, abandons this idea, and gradually becomes attached to the service of Vasudeva. Sometimes, unfortunately, in the name of devotee sangha, the subject matter can degrade into the mundane, just talking about this, that, and the other thing. Gramya Katha, literally village talks. And that helps nobody. The purpose of coming together as devotees is, as Prabhupada said, to hear and chant. It's very powerful if it's focused on that. Doing kirtan, hearing from Gita, hearing from Bhagavatam, discussing the points, very powerful. Shrimvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shavana Kirtana we heard earlier from the purport, that it cleanses the heart. It's very powerful if it's done in the association of devotees who are very much focused and fixed on this. So then proper association will certainly result in advancement, and improper association results in little or no advancement. It's as simple as that. Again, as Rupa Goswami has said, there's a process, step-by-step process, from Shraddha to Prema. And it's a formula. You have to follow the formula if you expect to get the result. And sadhu sangha is the crucial point. Associating with devotees in the proper way, and certainly not offending them, always trying to serve them, and then we can advance. And if we're unable to do that, or unable means we choose not to, then we're stuck. And in fact, it so happens that we may just lose the opportunity to associate with devotees if we commit offenses to their lotus feet. So, important points are made. The power of hearing and chanting, but that power is magnified many-fold in the association of devotees. So it's essential that we associate with one another in the proper manner, being in the mood of a servant. As one devotee nicely put it, the only question we should ask when we come into the association of other devotees is, how may I serve you, Prabhu? And if everyone's asking that same question, it creates a wonderful transcendental atmosphere. It's a fact. And those sanghas that have devotees in that mood, they're wonderful. So if we can just learn to ask that question when we come into the sangha of other devotees, how may I serve you, Prabhu? Then I believe that will help us, to guide our thoughts, our words, and our actions in such a way that we can make advancement in Krishna consciousness. So those are the thoughts I had on this verse. This is one of those verses you could go on and speak probably for months, but in the time allotted to us, these are the points that I kind of came up with. Nitai Gaur Sundar Prabhu?
Thank you very much, Maharaj, to start off the year with such a powerful invocation, why we meet, why we should meet, and hopefully we'll continue to have your associates on a monthly basis, if your health permitting. So Maharaj, you gave a contrast what Prahlad, but Nrsimhadev told Prahlad Maharaj that your generations will be free of all this, they will be liberated. Now Skanda Puran said that if you don't behave with the Vaishnavas, then you will take, not only you take them with you too. So that's a very powerful statement, Maharaj. So.
Well, that verse, I think if we placed it somewhere, on our desks perhaps, or wherever it might be, put it on the wall perhaps, remind ourselves, because we're products of Kali Yuga, and one of the things is forgetfulness, obviously. dull-headed in Kali Yuga. So we have to remind ourselves. So these kind of verses, they wake us up, to the reality that we somehow have to develop that mood of, wanting to serve the devotees. And that's the only safeguard against offending them. If we're not in the mood of service, then, it's likely that we'll start to consider them, quite ordinary and speak something or do something. It happens proportionate, to the mood we have as, being a servant of the devotees. So these kind of verses, they remind us. They remind us. So our advancement really rises and falls on devotee sangha. It's just something that is an absolute essential kind of aspect of our process.
Hemlata has a comment or question, Maharaj?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for a wonderful class and reminding us of the proper etiquette in dealing with Vaishnavas and taking their Sangha in a proper manner. My question is, we definitely try to avoid offenses, but then sometimes we become target of offenses of other people who are not mature in Krishna consciousness. How do we deal with such situations?
With humility, as far as we can. There are kanishtas who are just, they got a chronic kind of condition of being critical. And if something is aimed at us, then it may be difficult for us to do much about it. It depends on the relationship we have with the person, but it probably isn't very good if they're so critical. We can reach out to someone else who may be their peer, or better, someone who is their superior. And that devotee perhaps can speak to them about this. And because if someone's in that mood to be critical, it's very likely they're not just critical of one person. If you go down that path, you tend to be critical of others and almost everyone. Then it's just a question of degree, more or less. This one said this one did that. That becomes their kind of kata. That's their consciousness, that they see everyone like that. So yeah, so someone who's their peer or their better, their superior, perhaps can speak to them. Provided they have respect for someone. You have cases that sometimes they have respect for no one, and that's a problem. And generally what happens over time with persons like that is that, the load of offenses becomes so great that, Krishna doesn't tolerate anymore. And they leave. They just disappear. And in their mind, they're thinking that they're justified because everybody else is like that. And, they gradually lose taste. Because if you don't have taste to serve the devotees properly, then you won't have taste for chanting Krishna's holy name, and you won't have taste for, hearing the Bhagavatam, worshiping the deity, and everything else. Gradually, that will diminish over time, and you'll just lose taste. It can happen, gradually. It can happen quite quickly. Something can happen. But we know, it's very clear, that Krishna doesn't tolerate it. He'll tolerate offenses to himself, but he won't tolerate offenses to his devotees. That's him. He won't tolerate it. So
Should I look into my own heart as to why I have caused that feeling of that person wanting to commit an offense towards me?
Mm. Humility would have that as a natural outcome. If we're searching our own heart, why is this person saying yes? And maybe we'll find that maybe there's something we did. Maybe we somehow mistreated them somewhere along the line, or maybe we didn't even realize it. Maybe there was something we said, and then they took it, in a bad way. And maybe that wasn't the intention. But you know what they say about intention, right? There's that saying, the path to hell is paved with good intention. So we may not have intended that, but they may have taken it like this. So if we have that relationship, and if we can muster that humility within our heart, then we could approach them. We can approach them and say is there something I said? There's something I did? Did I offend you in some way in the past? I feel like you're not satisfied with me. You're not happy with me. Is there something I can do? Can we make this right? And in Kali Yuga is full of conflict also, depending on the degree of this. If it's something which is deep and long-standing, we could even reach out to someone to help mediate a situation. That's sometimes required. Oftentimes required, actually. That's why we have an ISKCON resolve, because there was enough of that warranted having this this particular group of devotees focused on this. But sure, if we have that humility, we search our own heart, and we could, with humility, go to that person and say, did I say or do something that offended you in the past? I don't want this. I want to, if there's something in my heart, I want to pull it out. If we can do that, great. And maybe that will resolve it. So we could certainly try. And if that works, fine. If it doesn't, then, as I said, maybe a peer or someone superior could help them.
Thank you, Maharaj.
You're welcome. Anything else?
Along the same lines, Maharaj, so if someone is not a Vaishnav, like someone's Christian or Muslim, and they're preaching as well, but they are offensive to the Vaishnavas, so are they supposed to go to hell? According to Skanda Puran?
You're speaking of someone who's not a Vaishnava?
Yeah, and they're offending Vaishnavas, like, the other missionaries that do go to India and preach and stuff, and they're offended, they're offensive to the Vaishnavas.
Yeah, I think there's it doesn't mention anywhere that if they are of this group or that group. I think it's just a general kind of blanket policy that if you offend devotees, this will happen. So it doesn't make a difference if you are a practicing Vaishnava or not. If you offend Vaishnavas, it's a problem. We take the example of Chankazi, for example, very offensive to Srila Haridas Thakur. Now, he was of another religious belief and everything like that, but offensive to him. And, that was disastrous for him. We have instances like this. So I think these kind of verses, they refer to anyone who offends devotees. It's a serious matter. But perhaps most serious for those of us who are aspiring devotees, and because if you sin in knowledge, it's worse than kind of sinning in ignorance. So if we know this and we still do it, what does it mean? So like that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hare Krishna. All right. Are we good? You're muted, Nitai Gaur Center Prabhu.
Any more question or comment for Maharaj? I don't see Maharaj any question, comments.
Mm.
So thank you, Maharaj. Thank you very much for your mercy.
Here, well,
I hope we will continue to be recipient of your mercy next this year, 22.
you always get that in somehow or another, multiple
That's the
times.
that's the only hope, Maharaj. At least for me.
Well, Krishna willing, I will continue this, doing the monthly sangha, and I feel benefited by your sangha. I think anytime we can associate with devotees, it's a rare opportunity. It's something we should never take for granted because we don't know. We really don't know. At any point, something can happen, and particularly in this day and age, we don't know what can happen. We may be cut off. I mean, let's just imagine. I mean, I don't want to be like a doomsdayer here, but what if the internet somehow shut down, right? We'd be, or somehow or another there was a global catastrophe, even worse than the pandemic, right? Shut down everything. Okay, no way to communicate, no way to travel. You were stuck, right? And so then whoever you're with, that's it. I can't reach out to someone, across the world here in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I'm here by myself with whoever else I'm with. Now, just think about the fact if your relationships are not good with those persons that you may be surrounded by, you're in bad shape. You're in bad shape. You can't go running and begging for mercy from devotees in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Then you're just stuck there. So it's better to have good relationships because you never know. This may seem far-fetched, but nowadays, I don't know. Anything can happen, right? Anything can happen. So all more the reason to make sure our relationships are in good order and we're serving the devotees wherever we're at and value that sangha. Yeah. So thank you all so much, and Krishna willing, we'll be back in a month's time with a discussion of another wonderful verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And as always, it's my great honor, good fortune, and privilege to be with you. And thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare
All the best. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Say our Vaishnava Pranam.
Maharaj did the Vaishnava Pranam in the beginning, so we can do it again. Vancha
Vanchakalpa trupaya shakpa sindhubhaya vacha paritanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.
Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna.
Vaishnavebhyo namaha.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.